Brian Anderson and I did the book Faces, and I thought it'd be a good idea to capture some of the older guys before they went to wherever they're going after their deaths. And believe it or not, I put a comment on Facebook saying, does anybody know anyone who'd make a DVD? And I had a couple of clowns turn up with mobile phones and their mother's video camera who said they'd be able to do it. But then I knew a guy called Trevor Drain who ran a company, or was involved in a company called Revelation Films, and he said he liked the idea, and it went from there really. There's no reenactments. There's no policemen on it giving their opinions. There's no probation officers. There's no annoying presenter, mainly because I'm a crap presenter, but there's no presenter on there asking questions and leading the interviewee to a place they want to be. I think if you let someone sit down and just tell their story, they kind of get lost in it themselves and end up telling you more than they wish they had done at the end. So I think it's, in that regard, it's really worked. You know, I'm not a presenter, never will be. I don't try to be. And I do think, for instance, if you watch Danny Dyer, is a lovely guy. You know, the programme, Danny Dyer's programmes, for instance, I'm not having a go at him. His programmes are more about Danny, what he thinks. You know, I'm going to meet these geezers, I've heard he's this. People aren't really interested, I don't believe, or I'm certainly not, in what Danny Dyer thinks about the person he's going to meet. I'm not really interested in what he thinks about what the guy's done. I would much rather the guy tell me what he thinks of himself and tell me his version of events. So, you know, as much as possible, you've got to remove yourself from that. If you want that to happen, you've got to let that person do that. And regarding not glamorising it, how can you glamorise murder? And, you know, in this series, we've met people like Sandy Percival, you know, Joe Egan, who's Nicky Regan, not so much Joe, but, you know, he's brought his own misery upon himself. But Nicky Regan, to a degree, brought it upon himself, Sandy Percival. And if a man goes to prison and another goes to his grave, that's not the be-all and end-all. Mrs. Beauchel's life has been ruined because her son's dead. Mrs. Percival's life's ruined because her son's in prison. So I don't know how you can glamorise that, really, unless people do glamorise it. Dave Courtney's glamorised it all his life. But he and I have got a long history of attacking each other, albeit through the media. And I walked away from his house, and not many people believe this, with a sort of admiration for him because he'd been so honest. And I think because he's now older, I think he realises himself he's lost his son, who was murdered, and he's lost his wife because she's just had enough of that life. And I think he's realised that it isn't glamorous, do you mean? Which I did admire him for kind of admitting that. So I don't. People do glamorise it, but it's not for me, and I'm glad we don't, because it makes it a more powerful programme. Because I've been subjected to the same sort of things as they have through the media, i.e. the media went along with Paul Betts's allegation that I was somehow responsible for his daughter's death. There's been allegations of a type in the media that I could be somehow involved in the murder of my former friends. Because I've been through that, I think people who have been through similar things with other crimes kind of think, well, you know, he knows where I'm coming from. I kind of trust him not to go on the establishment side and stay our side of the fence and protect me. So I think they feel more at ease talking to one of their own than a professional presenter. It assists, but, you know, percentage-wise, 90% of the people we've asked have said no problem. But there's always one, there's always two, there's always three. Charlie Seeger, for instance, really, really nice guy. Known him a long time. You know, Charlie felt, yeah, I want to do it, but it's all got to be about me. It's all got to be the way I want to do it. Which, you know, is fine, but not for us. And, you know, you don't want people dictating the way you're going to do things. Dennis Arif was quite funny. I originally wanted a photograph for him for the book, and he won't mind me saying this. And rather than do what a lot of journalists do and sit outside his house in a van with dark windows and photograph him, I thought I'll send him a letter to be polite and say, look, this is what we're doing. Will you pose up for a photograph? And one day I got this phone call. I didn't know who it was from. So I answered the call, and this guy said, have you got health insurance? And I thought it was some sort of salesman. I went, no, you know, why is that? And he went, because you're going to fucking need it. Sending these things to my... And when I explained to him, you know, that we were doing things up front and we'd asked his permission rather... You know, he laughed about it and he was fine. Roy Shaw now shouldn't speak ill of the dead. I'm not speaking ill of the dead, just telling the truth. He posed up for the photographs and everything else and would have done the programme if he hadn't have died. There's a lot of jealousy and, you know, it's a bit like a beauty pageant, these programmes for the underworld. They all want to be the main event. They all want to be, you know, seen better than the others, and there's a lot of back scratching and jealousy. And somebody had told Roy that we were going to do something with his photographs without his permission, and he rang Brian up, threatened to stab him and everything else. So there's been moments, you know, I rang him up and said, fucking, ease up, Roy, you know, and he's only a photographer, he's not going to do anything bad to you. And he was laughed about and he was all right at the end. But I say 90% of them have been all right, but you'll always get the odd ones, you know what I mean? It's a bit of a domino effect, you know. If Eddie Richardson agrees to do it, then everybody below Eddie in the pecking order thinks, well, Eddie's in it, we want to do it. Freddie Foreman wants to do it, you know, we want to do it. So it's winning over the hierarchy, if you like. In Scotland, if Paul Ferris does it, we'll all do it, you know. So, and them guys are pretty media savvy anyway, you know what I mean? So they wouldn't do a programme unless it was somehow beneficial to them, or, you know, this isn't... It's more of an historical programme than hard men bigging themselves up, do you know what I mean? It's a bit of social history. So, like the Donnellys said in Manchester, you know, we've never done anything like this before. And we're part of Manchester's history, so we want to be in it, you know. So I think there was a bit of that. As you get older, everyone wants to be remembered. And I think a lot of the older guys thought, I want to be part of this. Because it is, you know, no one's ever done it before, where you've had Ferris, Richardson, Foreman, Fraser, all in the same documentary. It's never happened, and it'll never happen again, because unfortunately some of those people are no longer with us. It's really, really difficult, and this has been a problem where, without naming names, if a guy who's been accused of a crime and is notorious is in the programme, and a guy who he perceives has been an enemy or somebody who informed on him or somebody who did him wrong, he's in the programme, he'll say, what you got him in the programme for? He's a grass, he's a wrong un, he's this, he's that. But if you're trying to tell a complete story, it's not Friends Reunited, do you know what I mean? If you're trying to tell a complete story, you've got to have both sides of the story. So inevitably, you know, to tell the Cray story, you've got to have Lenny Hamilton, God rest his soul, he's dead, who Ronnie Cray tortured. you've got to have Freddie Foreman who says, you know, the Crays are all right. You've got to have both sides to get the complete picture, do you know? And we don't tell people what the picture is. We let people tell their story. And between Freddie Foreman, for instance, and Lenny Hamilton, for instance, between those two lies the truth. Do you know what I mean? In the middle of that lies the truth. It's captured the most important, or probably the most important thing. It's captured a bit of social history, and I think this series will be more important in 20 years' time when the likes of Foreman, Fraser is no more, Foreman, and all these people, Fraser as well, because we've captured him. It is a bit of social history. Because they've not sat there saying, yeah, you know, I shot this guy, I chopped him up and laughed about it. They've actually told it as it was. Walter Norville has captured a bit of Glasgow's history in an interview. And I think we've done that really well. And it tells the stories of these cities through these people. So that's something to be proud of, I think. I'm not proud of any of the interviews because, as I say, I don't like to think that anyone should look up to myself or any of these people. But the interview I kind of enjoy the most, my God, there's lots, you know. Sandy Percival's is moving. Joe Egan's is. Nicky Regan's is quite telling at the end. Christy Dunn was very, very difficult to get, extremely difficult, and you know, the whole Irish episode I thought would be impossible to do because Irish villains do not speak to the press, and they just came, and it was really good. Billy Clare, I think, is fascinating. I think that's one of the best interviews. I don't like looking back, you know. I say to my kids, forget about yesterday because you can't change it. Today's today and tomorrow might never come, so just get on with it. I don't believe in looking back. No one's been intimidating. I mean, you know, all these people, they're just normal people, you know. As Dave Courtney says, you know, he doesn't walk around his house. Well, he does actually. Well, dressed as a gangster, and you know, they're just normal people who have committed crime. So none of them are intimidating. They're all quite all right people, you know what I mean. There's no such thing as big villains. You know, the most powerful villain's the one who has the opportunity and has got the biggest weapon. And I don't mean that, you know, a gun or whatever. All that's history. You know, 16-year-old kids will blow away me. They'll blow away Paul Ferris. They'll blow away Freddie Foreman. They're not interested in reputations anymore. If someone messes with them or upsets them, they'll just blow them away. You know what I mean? None. Because, again, these people who we've interviewed are just normal people who, you know, might have reputations or something, but all that's, you know, that's tabloid nonsense, all that is. We somehow managed to get into this living museum where they film Peaky Blinders, and we thought it'd be brilliant. But we spent the whole day there trying to get me to say 2 lines, which I just couldn't remember. So when you start laughing, you can't really stop, can you? So that was, yeah, that was.
It started off daylight, and by the time we were finished, it was pitch dark.
It was sun up, yeah.
So if you watch that link, you'll see the sun's going down. Each word is a different take.
Yeah. The only person, and this sounds a bit daft, but the only person who had made me sort of feel awkward or uncomfortable, besides Chris, was Joe Doherty in Belfast, who is a notorious, or, you know, no, let's be right, he's not notorious, he's a famous Republican volunteer. And when I was sitting talking to Joe, I was thinking he escaped from the maze, from prison in the spring of '81, around May I think it was. And I thought, I was a serving soldier at the time in Northern Ireland at that time. And I don't remember it, but I'm pretty sure we'd have been made aware he'd escaped, because all the time you're getting photographs of people, look out for this person on checkpoints. And I just thought, you know, this guy's sitting here, he's such a really, really nice guy, you know, and he really was a nice, sincere guy. And I was thinking, you know, 81, 91, 2001, you know, 30 years ago, if I'd have met Joe, I'd have probably shot him. Or if he'd have met me, he'd have shot me. And, you know, that just made me... I've always thought that the conflict, all conflicts are ridiculous. But being a soldier, it made it even more ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? Thinking I'd have gladly shot this guy and probably bragged about it for the rest of my life, and he'd have shot me and probably been proud that he'd killed the enemy for the rest of his life. And I think that's the only time I really had any sort of feeling about someone I'd met. You know what I mean? All the others I thought were just all right people, not nice people. This might upset a few people, I know it does because I've written about it, but I was trying to help an 8-year-old boy who had a horrific road accident, and I tried to do a charity auction for him, and I was asking football teams and pop stars and people like that to give me stuff to auction off. And Reggie Cray phoned my house and said, I'd read about all this in the papers and we want to help this boy. And I thought, fine, you know what I mean, someone will buy something that the Crays have painted or signed or... So he genuinely helped me, and his brother Ronnie. I got to know Ronnie, and I used to visit him every day eventually, well, most days. And I got on really well with Ronnie, and Ronnie said, oh, go and see me brother, go and see me brother. So I went to see Reggie, and Reggie's entourage at that time was awful. It was Dave Courtney was always there, and it was all these, I'm not saying anything bad about Dave, but all the other people around Courtney, around Cray, were all little wannabes who want to be Reggie's mate, I want to be Reggie's, and they'd all, you know, people that have legitimate businesses like a taxi firm, and they'd go to Reggie, oh, be my business partner, so they could print business cards with Billy Smith and Reg Cray on, you know, and give half their profits to Reggie. And I didn't really like it, but I liked Reggie, he was all right. But then the more I got to know him over the years, the more uncomfortable I became, because he genuinely did, and I'm not trying to upset anyone, he genuinely did have teenage boys visit him, and he had unhealthy relationships with teenage boys, and, you know, his friend in the prison was his boyfriend, who has since claimed that he raped him, which, you know, what was he doing hanging about with him if that was true? And so when I found all that out, I went, oh, it's not for me, do you know what I mean? And we parted on fairly good terms, and I just had nothing more to do with him. So I liked him when I first met him, but when I got to know him, it's not the sort of person I wanted to be around. Nobody, because the law in this country now, you know, similar to the RICO laws, there will always be the odd person. But, you know, Terry Adams is waiting to go back to prison now because everything he owns, or everything he did own, everything he's possessed, you know, the police now, they don't need to investigate crime. If you're driving a Porsche, a man with a clipboard could knock your door and he'll say, "Excuse me, where did you get the money for that Porsche?" So if you've got no legal income, you have to say, "Well, I got that money as a builder." So he'll go, "So where's your tax returns?" So if you haven't declared that money, the taxman nicks you. So you're stuck, you know. It's really, really difficult to have money, enjoy it, and be a criminal. And villains all over the country are being hammered. And I'm not talking about millionaires. I know some travelling people who had a little bit of land, a nice car, and they've been done. You know, one of my friends in Peterborough. The criminal assets people are just on everyone because there's no big investigation. Nice car, where'd you get it from? Nice house, where'd you get it from? It's a really simple investigation, what earns millions of pounds for the government. So they're really strong on it. So, and if you are financially successful through crime, and I don't know, I know a couple but not many, what's the cost to your family? What's the cost to you mentally, stress-wise? You know, I don't think anyone can say I'm a successful criminal. I'm sure there's one or two, but generally I don't think they exist. Years ago, when you're talking about these people are from working class communities. So rather than, and there were people who did this, who went and bought big houses, but if you leave your environment, your community, you lose control of your community. So to stay in control, you've got to remain on your manor, if you like. Do you know what I mean? So Arthur Thompson in Glasgow bought 2 or 3 houses, which were, you know, joined together, and turned them into one house and called it the Ponderosa. And amongst his community, that was like a castle. Do you know what I mean? This guy had 3 council houses knocked together into one, and that was a real status symbol back then. So Arthur was successful at doing that. The other guy who done it is Jemmy the Whale Gantley in Dublin, in Crumlin. You know, he's got this big house where its council houses joined together, and within his community, that's a sign of success. Do you know what I mean? And obviously Tony Tucker, who was with me, bought a 250 grand bungalow, which was a lot of money at the time. And amongst all the people in the club, it was great, but he wasn't living in his community. Do you know what I mean? And back in the day, that was a status symbol, a big house on your council estate. You know what I mean? And you could still control your community, because once you move out of it, you lose control. Do you know what I mean? The last people on earth who should be role models of failures in society, and dress it up any way you want. Criminals are failures, because if you look at anybody, you know, go back to Freddie Foreman, and sorry Freddie if I keep bringing your name up, but Freddie Foreman and those type of people strive all their life, and when they've got a lot of money from whatever, right, they try and invest that money in straight businesses to become straight people. That's their goal, to earn enough money to have a legal living. And they send their children to acting school, private schools, like Jamie Foreman, very successful actor now, you know, Freddie's son on EastEnders and all that. Their aim in life is to be straight. They don't commit crime to be successful criminals. They commit crime to better their family so they can live a legitimate life. So even they don't see crime as chic or cool. Do you know what I mean? Well, you're talking about historical things. You know, these people have been to prison for these crimes, so you can't inform. You can report, but you're not informing on people because they've been to prison. It's ridiculous. And you couldn't allow someone to come on the programme and say, yeah, I committed a robbery and got away with it. For the simple reason, it would just cause a legal nightmare for the TV company, and the police would investigate it. The programme would be stopped until, you know, it'd gone to court. So you couldn't allow people to inform or you know, reveal fresh crimes. But I suppose kind of, you know, if I try and help his argument out, Billy Loban is appearing in this programme, and he is very aggrieved by not just what Paul Ferris says about him, but what the media. He's more aggrieved about what the media say about him, because he sees the media as being irresponsible for allowing Paul to say Billy Loban's this, Billy Loban's that. So he's beefs with the media more with Paul Ferris. So Paul Ferris will take the view that Loban's a grass and Loban's a that, which, you know, Paul's entitled to. So I suppose people could say, oh, by letting Loban on the programme, you're allowing grasses on there, you're allowing this on there. I don't think, you know, is Loban a grass? I don't think he's give evidence in court against Paul. He might have said things in books and things like that. So that's a debate, you know what I mean? But you've got to let both, as I said originally, you've got to allow both sides of the argument to have their say. Otherwise, I'm sure Paul appreciates, you've got to let both sides of the people, you know, both sides of the story have their say. And that's just the right way to do things. We've not made this series, or the last series, to upset people or to be controversial. You know, we want people to tell their stories without issue, do you know what I mean? And without giving someone the, you know, people have come on the programme and really slated people, and we've took that out because we don't think it's right or necessary, do you know what I mean? But I will always maintain that however unpalatable a person may be, or how much I dislike them, and I've interviewed a few people I really dislike, but I still think they're entitled to their say. As I say, I don't really dislike Dave Courtney, but I don't like him as a person, and he's never sent me a Christmas card, so I think the feeling's mutual. But I still think he's entitled to his say, do you know what I mean? However uncomfortable that makes me feel, or others feel, do you know what I mean? Because a lot of people said to me, how can you have him on the programme? You've spent 10 years slagging him off. But he's entitled to his say, isn't he?